Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Elise Gonzalez, and I'm the director of Ruby City here in San Antonio. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's program, a virtual walkthrough of Waking Dream, our inaugural exhibition here at Ruby City. The exhibition was curated by Kathryn Kanjo, who is also the president of the Linda Pace Foundation Board of Trustees. She has a long history with the foundation and was a close personal friend and confidant of our founder, Linda Pace, whom she came to know very well when she was the director of Art Pace, the renowned artist residency program that Linda also established. Kathryn served in that capacity from 2000 to 2006, and since 2007, she has been on the foundation board. During her tenure on the board, she has supported or spearheaded numerous terrific acquisitions that build upon Linda's interests and sensibilities, many of which you'll see tonight in the exhibition. She also helped to steer development of Ruby City, our fantastic and incredible building designed by Sir David Adjaye, and which opened in October of 2019 with her exhibition, Waking Dream. As you can see, she has made a significant contribution to our institution, and this is perhaps doubly impressive when you consider that she has held demanding museum leadership roles throughout all this time. Currently, she is the David C. Copley Director and CEO of the Museum of Contemporary Art, San Diego. She recently completed a celebrated renovation and expansion of its La Jolla location, adding nearly 30,000 square feet of gallery space. Prior to this directorship, she was the chief curator and then deputy director and all at MCA San Diego. The completion of this renovation and expansion project is a tremendous accomplishment. In fact, Town and Country magazine pondered whether or not this was not the most beautiful museum in California. I'm glad they didn't lump Texas in there because we'd have a fight about that.
Exactly.
But it is perhaps all this more significant for her when you consider that she started her curatorial career there at MCA San Diego. And that was in the 1990s, where she started as an assistant curator and then moved on to associate curator. She has also served as the curator of contemporary art at the Portland Art Museum and was a director of the University Art Museum at UC Santa Barbara. Throughout her career, she has developed a roster of celebrated exhibitions focused on the work of artists such as Leonardo Drew, Isaac Julian, Jorge Pardo, Catherine Opie, Nancy Rubens, Diana Thader, and Rita McBride, among many others. These exhibitions are frequently expanded upon by her scholarly yet accessible writings, which have graced numerous publications. Her celebrated exhibition catalog, Jack Whitten, 5 Decades of Paintings, a show which he also curated, represents the first book to consider his work in an in-depth manner. And if you go to MCA San Diego, in addition to seeing the most beautiful museum in California, you will also see her curatorial prowess on view in the inaugural installation of the collection, which focuses on the legacies of abstraction in the Americas and Europe. I am delighted to have Kathryn here tonight. I'm very grateful to her for taking time out of her very busy schedule to walk us through Waking Dream. Now, if you have any questions throughout the talk, please feel free to submit them. There is a comment section that you can add those questions in, and we'll get to those in the last 15 minutes of the program, which we've allocated for Q&A. I also want to encourage everyone, if you can, to please stop by to see the show in person. I mean, it looks really good here in pictures, but it looks even better in person. Waking Dream will be on view through July 24th, so please do stop by and see us. And with that, I want to thank Kathryn. I thank her for her time and sharing her expertise with us this evening. And I'm very happy that you're with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Kathryn. So thank you.
Fair enough. Elise, goodness, thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's terrific to have my time in Texas and my association with Linda be recounted, and to have it bring us back to this evening's event. So thank you. That makes me feel very good. And it's true, we do have a beautiful new building here, and the pleasure of installing the museum's collection in this architecture reminded me of the experience in 2019 when I was able to install this inaugural exhibition at Ruby City. So thank you, and I'm glad to be here, and I thank Barbara and the whole team and Randy for inviting me. And I think we can bring on the PowerPoint. I'm hoping, I'm not sure who's able to join us on this virtual walkthrough, but I hope you have had the opportunity for a physical walkthrough of Ruby City, and specifically Waking Dream. I'll look at the next slide. This I at least mentioned, I think, that this is the inaugural exhibition. It's sort of stunning. Of course, we opened Ruby City in October of 2019. So it was just, we had just barely unveiled it when the world, shut it down with the onset of the pandemic. So for me, I have not been able to return since the fall. So I feel kind of pangs of longing as I look at these photos, beautiful photos of both the building that you see here, designed by David Adjaye, as Elise said, and of the exhibition. And the exhibition is, I think I'll take the next slide. I'm not trying to print that. The exhibition is entitled Waking Dream. And many of you know that dreams were important to Linda. And in fact, the fantastical image of Ruby City came to Linda in a dream, and she captured it in what she called one of her dream drawings, where she would use color pencil on small sheets of paper to capture the images which visited her at night. And in the exhibition, I wanted to capture that spirit of the sort of fantastical dream worlds that we through which we journey, and highlight some of the surreal quality of much of the work that Linda collected. In many of the pieces that we're going to see, I think you'll see that they hover between the recognizable and the otherworldly, and that they suggest themes often of vulnerability and resilience, that the subject matter can deal with ideas of the self and our community, as well as ideas of home. Linda herself Linda, of course, we know as a philanthropist, as an artist. Through Ruby City, we see her as a collector. We're seeing her collection on view. But I mentioned first or second that she was an artist as well. Linda tended not to exhibit her own work in her home, but she was always honored to see her creations presented in other institutions or in other folks' collections. So I took the liberty of highlighting some of Linda's works in this exhibition. So here we're seeing Linda's Red Project. But in many ways, I think the whole exhibition, Waking Dream, is a kind of portrait of Linda, both as a collector and as an artist. And so, as I say, I'm trying to reflect her interests and her passions as seen in the work that she collected, the artists she admired and the work she made. And in many ways, this piece, Red Project, which is this amalgamation of small, disposable, everyday objects, the prosaic, the common, that she's gathered into this massive installation that becomes this full cosmos. So this tiny thing becomes this large thing. These sort of throwaway objects get memorialized and unified by color. And so these are some of the ideas that I think attract Linda and for her own creations, but I think in other people's artworks, the idea of kind of the micro to the macro and the prosaic to the profound. And I like that when you come into the exhibition, you walk in to Ruby City and you come into the lobby space, which has this David Adjaye's design, this deep, rich walls, rich red colored walls, the continuation of the red concrete, which you saw the precast concrete in the exterior of the building. So you're walking into this warm chamber, and you see Linda's piece right in front of you. The next slide orients you or shows you the next piece on view, which is Diana Thader's, the video artist piece. So I think that the juxtaposition on this, I'm going to try to talk about why I place certain things together, and the pairing. Maybe Barbara, if you can go back 2 slides to the installation view, so that you see these 2 things together. This Linda's cosmos in a way on the right, the red drawing, and then you see the Diana Thader piece, which are 4 monitors that are stacked that look like they're giving us sort of a planetary systems. These are in fact images of the sun, not of planets, of the sun, that she has blocked with using the primary colors of video, red, green, and blue, and then the 4th screen merges all of the colors together. So that we have this actual literal sort of representation of space, and I think this suggestion of the cosmos in Linda's work. So that brings you into the space, and then you ascend the stairway and you come into the galleries upstairs. So I'm going to have you jump ahead, Barbara. To when you get to the top of the stairs, you're met with additional celestial imagery, if you will. This wax wall relief by the American artist Maya Lin. Maya Lin, who's perhaps best known for the Vietnam War Memorial, but whose work looks at patterns and forms of nature at sort of a massive scale. Here she shows us the phases of the moon waxing and waning. So you come from these images of Diana Thader's sun, the sequence of suns, to this cycle of moons, upstairs with Maya Lin's work. And you're seeing here again, maybe not again, but I'm going to talk about it, Linda's interest in materiality. So often that's a link between the objects that we see in this exhibition, whether it's the sort of synthetic throwaway plasticness of Linda's red project, that very tactile feeling, or these smooth wax forms of Maya Lin's piece. So materiality is another item that links us. But Linda actually really began her collecting painting, and it's not that she only collects sculpture, she collects painting as well. So the piece that you see opposite of this is Ana Fernandez's Los Valles, Fruits and Foods. I'm reading the title from the piece because I can't get my checklist in front of me quickly enough. This piece we paired opposite, thinking of the uses of light. I mean, you come up the stairway, you're pulled up, you go up the stairways, and you see the light from Chris Park coming through the David Adjaye building. So you're pulled, you advance through the architecture because of the light of the architecture. And then you come to see these gentle sort of phases of the moon on the right. And then across from it, this a different kind of night sky, this one that's depicted by Ana Fernandez in the fruit stand, artificial light illuminating this activity, but kind of a lonely activity, I would say. You still feel these people are together but apart, even standing online but not necessarily engaged in conversation or sitting alone at the table. So this both sort of colorful and very familiar Texas feeling scene of community, of place, but also sort of a mood, I think, of isolation. And I think something that's interesting in Ana's work that we see in many of the pieces in Linda's collection, this is my interpretation, is that there's a feeling of place and community, and the particularity of place. And I do think, one thing that we'll see in Linda's collection is a commitment to Texas. We saw that when she established Art Pace, that the structure she gave to Art Pace was to pay attention to where we were at, Texas, by always inviting an artist from Texas, but to understand that Texas is part of our broader world, so that there would be an artist from somewhere else in the US and someone international. So both kind of, again, the particularities and the commonalities. I'm going to look at the next slide. So that's just as you come up the stairs. I'm hoping everybody who's on this has been into this beautiful space. So then you turn just to your right, and you see the large gallery unfold in front of you. The soaring ceilings at the staggered heights, and you really get this. You've come from the tighter red entry up this narrow stairway, and you come into this really glorious space, where we have composed almost a mise en scène of primarily sculptural works from Linda's collection. And setting up, I think, some of those themes I talked about, idea of home. I think this is one where you can almost look at, see this in some ways as a house. I mean, literally, I suppose, with the center image of Do Ho-sa's apartment building suggests the architecture, but then you also have is architecture. There's the shelves of Josiah McElhaney's sculpture, and the chairs of Abramovich, and the bookshelf of Rachel Whiteread, all at a glance. So you get this, and you might also see that there's a sense of monochromatic quality in these works. I talked about materiality. You're seeing plaster. You're seeing this scrim, satin scrim. You're seeing the glass cubes of Teresita's Fernandez piece, which Burnout, which you see on the back wall. I'll look at the next slide. So this is, then you turn, you're kind of coming around, and from the very sort of diaphanous and ghosted weight of the Do Ho-sa and many of the other pieces that we saw in the last image, you come suddenly to this massive wall by Leonardo Drew. Of rusted forms, of accumulation. So while some of the works seem distilled, other works seem to accrete and convey a sense of mass. And again, you look at Leonardo's work, and you can think about Linda's composition downstairs of Red Project. And then we'll turn to the next image, as if we're rotating in this space, and then you see the wall that shows Chuck Ramirez's work, the diptych on the wall, and Alejandro Diaz's sculpture. So I think we'll look closer at the next image. Shows us Chuck Ramirez, one of Linda's dear friends, and such an important artist, particularly for our Texas community. This is an early work that Linda had collected from, I think this is from 1998, maybe, I don't have it right in front of me. A ghosted image, right? I mean, you could almost think that these look like ghosts, but we know that Chuck's work is often a kind of memento mori, that he deals with time through these large scale photographs of, again, common objects, and oftentimes overlooked objects, or objects that are the aftermath of a moment. In this case, we see the garbage bags that are holding, I think it's the recycled clothes, sort of folded bedding, I believe, is what we see in these, but it's concealed, right? So, and it seems to be wanting to maybe break out the stretching of the plastic, so that there's a bodily suggestion even in these pieces. But again, I think that we can look about this kind of ghosted, monochromatic image of something being contained, of being discarded, perhaps being recycled, perhaps a sense of regeneration. It's the theme that we see in Chuck's work and other works on view here. The piece that's adjacent to it is by Alejandro Diaz. This piece is Muebles, so a furniture, but the parenthetical title is Hat Stand. And when we know Alejandro Diaz, if you know Alejandro Diaz, you understand that his work often deals with his kind of the clash of socioeconomic references from the kind of Tex-Mex middle class lifestyle to sort of high culture art world aspirations. Those two things often meet up in Alejandro's work. So this piece, looks like a young woman, every sort of regular woman dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, but it's referencing a sculpture, so this kind of high art world piece by a sculpture by Alan Jones, which, if you know these pop artworks, sort of sexual fetish-like sculptures made into suggest furniture. So they have this very uneasy quality of exploitation and sexual S&M kind of references to it. But Alejandro gives it to you, this piece of furniture, this hat stand, in the guise of what might be a domestic worker, right? So he turns that on its end and makes us aware and maybe, you know, slightly uncomfortable with this figurative sculpture. And she is the only person in this room, by the way. Everything else is this kind of shell of space of objects, including the next piece, which is Josiah McElhaney's sculpture here. Charlotte Perriand and Carlos Scarpa. So this is a sculpture where he is referencing, like Alejandro is referencing the art world, so too is Josiah McElhaney referencing a design world in this piece, where he shows off, where he recreates, he blows and creates these glass objects to make a kind of a nod or an homage to these design figures. But again, they're sort of ghosted and silent. I think there's a mood that we have in this installation. I'm going to look at the next piece. Is Teresita Fernandez's work that you saw glowing on the wall in the establishing shot, if you will. Teresita Fernandez, Burnout. You can link this piece. These are glass cubes that are, you know, less than an inch square and back painted with these golden hues and arranged directly onto the wall to create this kind of halo, or the piece is called Burnout. So you can read it as a planet, and particularly having come from St. Diana Thader's suns downstairs, Maya Lin's moons just on the other side of the wall, and then Teresita's sort of glowing sun. Again, I like to think of, you know, that all of these works are collected, you know, by one person, by Linda, and these images that appealed to her. Teresita Fernandez, of course, is important to Linda for several reasons. I mean, she, like many of these artists in Linda's collection, was a resident at Art Pace. So there's the legacy of that fine institution that Riley Robinson directs. So there's the connection in many of these artists to Art Pace. And then Linda continued her relationship with Teresita Fernandez, and actually had Teresita was the artist who oversaw the artistic elements of Chris Park, which is the park, of course, across the street from Ruby City. And we'll look at the next image. Marina Abramovich, Chair for a Man and His Spirit. Chair for a Man and His Spirit. This piece is 15 feet high, I think. You saw it in the installation shot to give you a sense, and the chair is, the small chair is human size. And the notion by Marina Abramovich, the Serbian artist, is that one would sit in the chair against a wall. I mean, it's just feet away from the wall, that you sit and you look at the wall, and above you is your spirit, so that you're maybe watched over by this spirit. It's this moment of reflection and quietude that looks so exquisite in this space. But this was an early acquisition for Linda. The piece itself is from 1993. So, and she had this installed outdoors before, and with the new space of Ruby City, we were able to bring it inside and have it read against David's architecture. I'm going to go on to the next. This work is Stay by Linda Pace. And you see it, you know what, Barbara, I'm sorry, I'm going to have you jump back. Do you mind going back to one of the installation views where you see through the Dohos? I love that you kind of don't quite see it. Not that I didn't want you to not see this piece, but that it becomes revealed with this kind of plea. So that so when you're looking at this work at the Dohosa, the lavender piece in the center of the room, you look through it on the left, you see on the wall the piece that we're going to look at now, Stay. And Stay was created by Linda Pace. And I'll let you jump forward, Barbara. This is why I asked Barbara to control the PowerPoint so I didn't have to deal with all this back and forth. Thank you. You're doing it very streamlined for me. So this is a work that Linda made with her then studio assistant, Kelly O'Connor, who I hope might be listening. A piece made after the passing of Linda's mother, so kind of a memorial, a plea, but also familiar looking work for Linda, right? It's the not special materials. These are silk, silk synthetic flowers. They are not real. They don't particularly look real, light blue and the periwinkle maybe. Gathered together into these words that implore and ask for that ask for remembrance, and that asks for a kind of return, a memory. But it also looks so much. It is Linda's work, and then you can see how downstairs, to a very different effect, the red projects can create a more riotous mood, different from the kind of melancholy of this piece, which, in some ways is made all the more poignant because of its, I think, sort of synthetic, sort of saccharine sentiment that it's kind of, it's almost too much to be sincere, but the sentiment is earnest. So I think that tension is a little bit of heartbreak that Linda taps into in the sensibility of her work. And the next piece is Christian Markley. I mentioned at the beginning of this, the title, Waking Dream. I wanted to tap the sort of surreal quality of many of the works that Linda collected, and Christian Markley's accordion has this surreal quality by the distortion of scale, the distortion of scale that we see in Marina Abramovich's, chair and its spirit, this kind of outsized thing, like it can't quite be, one's arms are not long enough to play this piece. So it snakes along the ground. Its own path, this snake-like form, but it's also, Christian Markley is also an artist like Alejandro, like Chuck Ramirez, like Teresita Fernandez, who had, like Dohosa for that matter, and Leonardo Drew, who had art pace residencies. And we remember this residency where he exhibited works, not just did a DJ project in Art Pace, but exhibited these works in Alamo Music next door to Art Pace. So this work remains in Linda's collection. And then behind it is the Leonardo Drew piece. So this is a different view of the work that you saw in installation. Again, Leonardo Drew, an early Art Pace resident. The idea of accumulation, of amassing objects, dealing with the sense of time, passage of time. These rusted forms are, just right adjacent to the recycling bags of Chuck Ramirez. This quality of recycling, maybe, perhaps rebirth. Think of the piece that was just on the other side calling Stay. This sort of emotion that you see in these pieces. And Leonardo Drew, also an early Art Pace resident, who took to San Antonio, and who wouldn't, but he came as an Art Pace resident and stayed for years, working in the Fine Silver building. But this exemplifies his work sort of really then and now, but with this forcing time, becoming this kind of force of nature by aging the artworks, by creating these sort of rust baths that unify these disparate materials. It's wood and fabric and all discarded materials, but they're unified in some way by this color, by this process of rusting, which itself embeds time. Leonardo, and also has this grid-like structure that we've seen, again in Linda's work downstairs and in others. And look at the next image. Okay, so then this is moving into the smaller gallery. And so you're looking forward. At the very background is Cornelia Parker's work hanging from the ceiling. Right in front of it is Kim Jones, and then these Robin O'Neill, Per Kirkeby, and Glenn Ligon on the walls. So this is just kind of our establishing shots, where there's a shift. First of all, like remember the last room, everything was sort of ghosted white and lavender and translucent and transparent. Here you're coming into things that are charred, literally burnt and darkened, and a much weightier feeling as you come in. So I'm trying to just have a shift of sensibility. And then the next image I think shows from the other side. So here you are, like with your back to the Cornelia Parker. You still see Kim Jones, the house in the floor, and you're looking ahead to Larry Pittman work, and Isa Genskin is off to the left, and again Robin O'Neill on the right. So that just helps establish you in the space. And we'll look a little closer at some of these works. When you look, actually, do you mind jumping back just one image, Barbara? So when you see the Larry Pittman here with the candle in the middle, and you look beyond, you're seeing the Chuck Ramirez on the wall. So that sort of sad packaged up garbage bag piece. And now we'll look at the Larry Pittman. Talked about the quality of memento mori in Chuck, the ideas of recycling, and Leonardo Drew's work, the sense of memorial in Linda's stay. This, I think, for Larry Pittman's work, we also see the suggestions of time and of tribute, maybe, that we see this candle. Larry Pittman, this work is probably from, I don't know where this work is from. You probably don't care. This work is from 1991. So, I mean, that's still pretty early, 1991. A lot of Linda's active collecting, of course, coincides with her founding of Art Pace. So Linda's collection is deep and strong from the 1990s forward. Larry Pittman, this is kind of high Larry Pittman, but he begins his career really in the late 70s and 80s, bringing in this kind of fearless sense of imagery and decoration and piling on of symbols and references. So this counterpoint to all the sort of monochromatic, distilled, minimal works we saw in the other room. But that's part of Larry Pittman's sort of arrival on the art scene at a time of sort of plurality and embrace of imagery that came with the feminist movement from the time period. But Larry has his distinctively own vocabulary, even though he's quoting different sort of cultural and artistic design references. But making these together, these images that are familiar on one hand, like we've seen these illustrations perhaps, or in books or whatnot, but creating a vocabulary still all his own, so beguiling and enigmatic and not easy to deduce or read. And I'll look at another image. Speaking of not easy to read or enigmatic, we see here an important painting by Glenn Ligon, Stranger in the Village, from the James Baldwin. The title comes from the James Baldwin essay, Stranger in the Village, number 11. This work is from 1998. Glenn Ligon, the African-American artist who's known particularly for his use of text dealing with identity, also had an Art Pace residency and created these works here in San Antonio, among others. And we'll look at the next slide because I think it helps you see the text in here. Acrylic, gesso, enamel, and coal dust. So it's a painting. It is a very black painting with stencils used to spell out the text from Stranger in the Village, which is about being a stranger in the village. I mean, I guess that's an obvious thing, but as you know, about being a Black man visiting a town in Switzerland where they cannot see him, like his difference is, renders him, almost invisible, if you will, which is the conceit in many ways that Ligon carries out in his own artwork, that he makes the text, reiterates it, paints it over and over so emphatically to the point of erasure, so that we can see, we can almost read it and we're denied it. It comes forward and goes away. And using the stencil, there's a quality of relief to the words with the gesso. The paint kind of builds up, and then the coal dust gives a sort of sparkle to it. And we can see the next slide. Just to help you to try to make sense or try to see, and that question of being seen and visibility and invisibility is focus for Glenn Ligon. And so then that blackened heavy work, I think, echoes some of the qualities of this sculptural piece by Cornelia Parker. I don't know, if you haven't seen this piece, it might be hard to understand that what you're seeing is suspended from the ceiling burnt wood that's hanging from monofilament in an exploded volume, like a cube. So this is, maybe 12 feet across, this cube of hanging wood. And this is Cornelia Parker, the British artist. Again, I'm going to keep saying, like, the art pace resident, who created a similar work during her art pace residence, using charred remains of a fire from where a church was on fire. This work is gathering the wood from a controlled burn in Florida that got out of control. So this effort to contend, to manage nature that got out of control, like our efforts to try to reign, take over here. So she goes to the site of the fire, gathers the wood, and recreates it and displays it for us in this, what is a shattered sort of minimalist volume. We're used to seeing the cube as this, sculptural form of stability, but here it's exploded and shown to us in its opposite form. So something else I was thinking about with Cornelia Parker to mention that Linda's early collecting also took a close look at the young British artists that were practicing in London in the 1990s, because Linda also had a home for a while, a second home in London, and so was able to be very involved in that scene as well. And as it happened, many of those artists also came to do residencies at Art Pace, Cornelia, Isaac Julian, for example. So just other themes that are personal to Linda, I think, or connections that are personal to Linda. I'll look at the next. So you have this, sort of charred form of the Cornelia Parker piece at the background of the gallery. In the center of the gallery, there's this sculpture by Kim Jones, and it is, as it appears, it is a dollhouse that was fashioned by the artist. The dates on this piece are 1974 through, I don't know, maybe 2014. So the 1974 is the date that Kim Jones built this dollhouse and then continued to work on it, transforming it. So this thing that was once, this sort of beautifully crafted object that he made, he alters it with his drawing. So the exterior is drawn to almost again, kind of charred like looking design, or maybe a kind of a camouflage pattern. And then when you go to the other side of the piece, the drawing continues with what is known as his war drawings. So the inside of this space is covered in these hatch marks, which are a kind of a mapping of battlefields, almost like a war games or child's play. Who's to say these days that all looks very relevant again, as we see incursions on the global stage. But what's happening here is Kim Jones is creating these drawings inside the house. Kim Jones himself is a war veteran, a Vietnam vet, whose work takes shape not only as drawings and sculpture as we see here, but who perhaps gained the most attention for his performance work as his alter ego Mudman, where he would perform walking in practically naked, but wearing, in underwear and wearing the combat boots that he wore in Vietnam, and then carrying a burden of a sculpture that he had fashioned on his back. So this kind of hybrid thing of the weight that one takes with them, that one carries with them. And which is making me think, I don't think I showed the image. I didn't show a detail of Do-Ho Suh's piece, did I? Whoops. Okay, well, the Do-Ho Suh, we don't have to go back to it, but the Do-Ho Suh, that purple piece that you saw, that beautiful, purple translucent piece, recreates a hallway in the apartment, one of the apartment buildings in which the artist lived. And Do-Ho Suh, who is an artist who's born Korea but has lived in the United States and in Europe, often makes work that are about what you carry with you, and the burdens and the connections that we take with us, and these things that become metaphors for home. So for Do-Ho Suh, it could be, the backpack that carries his artwork, or that actually carries the fabric that recreates this apartment building, if you will. And so I think in many ways, Kim Jones's work gets us to think about the burdens we carry, the psychological burdens that he makes physical in his performances, and then that he shows in a sort of metaphorical way here by showing us the home and what the memories that we can comport to our sense of place and home. That's not making a lot of sense, but I saw some connection in there. I'm going to look at the next image, which I realized didn't look really great on this. Because this is great. This is Robin O'Neill's epic drawing, whose title I can never remember. I tried to. Staring into the blankness, they fell in order to begin. Staring into the blankness, they fell in order to begin. And just to say, this is this massive drawing, 12 feet across, I think, with graphite on paper. Robin O'Neill and Kim Jones were two artists who were in residence together. Both of them these amazing draftsmen. Kim doing these the little hatch mark landscapes, and then Robin O'Neill doing these surreal scenes, both of landscapes but also of human figures that you barely see in the center of this composition, kind of raining down. I'm gonna look at the next image. I'm worried about time. And this, I was realizing as I looked at these together, doing this sort of one by one sequence makes this a little more cumbersome than if you were physically in the space. But with Isa Genskin's work, we're back in many ways to looking, well, in a lot of ways, this is a mixed media piece. This is like you're seeing electric tape and glitter and pieces, collage bits of paper onto these metal panels, creating this abstraction that seems to be sort of wrapped and bandaged and bound, but also, kind of, cheesy colors, fluorescent colors and sparkles and glitter. And this work, I think again, you think about materiality and Linda's interest in a kind of collaging sensibility, whether that's in two-dimensional of actually just, paper or tape, or the more assemblage kind of idea of bringing objects together. So that I think you see, look at this and look at Leonardo Drew and look at Linda's works to see how ideas of accumulation, occur in works that are assembled. And then with collage, you can have accumulation, but you also have excision, right? Cutting things away. So this is Isa Genskin, the German artist, who's an artist more of Linda's generation. I also note that there are artists, I think, in Linda's collecting that if she was schooled on abstract expressionism, because everybody was, at that time period, Linda's earliest collecting really was of artists just earlier than her generation. And then as she became closer to the art world through her own practice and through the establishment of Art Pace, she increasingly acquired artists who were, of her generation or even younger, so this is Isa Genskin as an artist who would be, of Linda's age, as would Per Kirkeby, who's the next artist I think I have on this slide. If we can see that, yeah. So Per Kirkeby, and I mentioned painting, that we saw Anna's Fernandez's painting in the other room. Linda's very early collecting is painting. Here we see this Per Kirkeby, which is such a different kind of landscape than the it's more tectonic, it's sort of physical and verdant than the landscape that we see just opposite it in Robin O'Neill's drawing. Really a exquisite piece, but again, sort of thinking of this as this gallery having these kinds of landscapes and structures where the earlier gallery had structures but more interior spaces. So this kind of landscape along with Robin O'Neill, and there's more. I've got so many more to go, and I'm a little worried about time. So the next group of images are kind of around the corner, and they point to sort of thematically what I was trying to show was Linda's interest in the creative life and self-expression. So these little group of artworks are portraits of, and often portraits of artists, sometimes self-portraits. And so here we see the British artist Jillian Waring in a work which she's posing, replicating a photograph of her younger self when Jillian Waring, was an art student. So Jillian Waring has this photograph of young her looking just like this with her surreal painting. This is what Jillian Waring was doing at that time, these sort of her youthful experiments in art. As you may know, she goes on to really be known as a photographer, and as the photographer who's mining the history of photography, as we see here. But here you see her early efforts, very sincerely documented. Adjacent to the Jillian Waring is the next image is a portrait of Jessie Amato by artist Cruz Ortiz. So this is like a double trouble. Cruz Ortiz, San Antonio artist and activist, I would say, whose recent practice, I mean, his practice is multivariant, but this work represents a more recent turn to painting, where he's documenting his community. He would describe this, I think, as a sort of romantic idea of our circles of influence. I think we can see this also as a desire to make something, to paint and to allow art. We want art to do so much for us, to communicate so many things. And, I think there's an urgency that we can put to art. And when we're using it in ways to generate activism or to convey messages, I think this is almost kind of a stepping back to say, and art, even just, not just, but when we're painting, can also resonate. Of course it resonates, but I think this almost gives the artist a chance to be, lighten the burden for the artist to be, what do I want to say? to remind of the different ways that an artist can make a difference is all I want to say. But then it's a portrait of Jessie Amato. So another, a key artist figure, as is Cruz at this point, but Jessie Amato still is a slightly older generation, I think, than Cruz Ortiz. And so I think we can look to Jessie as a leading figure in Texas art scene, but Chicano art scene generally. And so we see him sitting for this portrait, and we'll see his work shortly. The next piece, though, is a work by Wageshi Mutu, the Kenyan artist who also had an art pace residency, and whose work has increasingly, really since the time of this exhibition, shifted towards sculpture, even though she's always made sculpture, but she's probably also very well known for her collages. But this piece is, I'll look at the next one because I think that it's a better overview. This work is called The Second Dreamer. So we have to like that the title is The Second Dreamer. When we're dealing with Linda's, our dream tending Linda Pace in an exhibition called Waking Dream. But we can look at this sculpture and understand that Wageshi Mutu, an African artist, is looking at the European tradition of portraiture that this work seems to, not only with the sculpture itself, but with the pedestal, be referencing the artist Brancusi and other modernists. When we look at the head that might quote African sculpture, she's maybe reclaiming that as an African woman, and in fact inserting herself in it, because this visage does look somewhat like Wageshi Mutu. So I see this as a self-portrait of the artist. And the next image. Okay, so this is a view as you're kind of coming away from the big gallery. You see Stay is on the wall way back there. That's the blue piece with the flowers, the Rachel White reed, which I didn't talk about. Wageshi's piece is there in the middle. And then you're coming down to a series of prints by Texas artist Ethel Shipton, and that's the next image. And so the detail view, these series of prints that follow, that are of exit signs off of the freeway, as the approach of heading south to the border to Laredo. Ethel's work often deals with choices and chance and movement. These signs, these exit signs, remind us, I think, that when you exit one thing, you're entering another. So this idea of transition and proximity and movement through space. But I think too, in light of the way I've been talking about the other works in the show, this sense of a journey or cycle, passage. I'm going to look at what the next slides are. Another detail, well, not detail, separate work. And that's my favorite. If I could just jump back to that. Just in terms of speaking of our border, well, here too, San Diego, border condition of Laredo, Nuevo Laredo. And for Ethel herself, as somebody who's lived at, reared in the border region and can identify with both cultures. So I like that one. And then as you exit really through the space, go down the stairway. Again, this might be disorienting, but if we remember, we had you come up the one stairway and you saw Maya Lin's Phases of the Moon. As you go down the other stairway and this narrow wall ahead of you, we have installed in the sort of vertical arrangement these multiple works by Jessie Amato. So the subject of Cruz Ortiz's portrait that we saw just earlier. So these are felt wall hangings, discs that the artist Jessie Amato talked about him as a revered Chicano artist. Something that's particular about Jessie's practice is that he's really brought a vocabulary of conceptual art to the subject or to the category of Chicano art. I mean, so you could talk about Jessie as a conceptual artist, or you could say he takes on themes of can take on themes of Mexican American identity, but leans into them with the vocabulary of conceptualism, and always a very poetic sense of materials, and often with reference to literary themes and other cultural forms, movies, literatures. Although this series with these circular discs are making reference to pills, not to a poem or a story per se, but to pills that can often structure our time and our life and heal us or mislead us. But the sort of the ubiquity of medicine maybe that we take these days, he translates into this beautiful abstract work that leads us downstairs. And at the foot of the stairs, you see this exquisite Murano blown glass work by the African-American artist Joyce Scott. Again, another art paste resin, very early art paste resin, although this is a later work. The artist is known for bringing, tough, bold kind of content, very often dealing with African-American identity, in through the crafting format, oftentimes beading. But in this series of works, she worked with artisans in Murano, Italy, to blow these glass sculptures. And in this case, she's blowing this figure that's a hybrid of a kind of a Buddha form that seems to be birthing this crystalline child, but also has this sort of African-like features. And it's the blown glass, but then with her beadwork, that this is a snake that comes up and around her neck. But and it's called Breathe. The piece is called Breathe. And so this, again, we've talked about like the sort of the site regeneration, cycles of life, passages, the memorial and birth. And so these sort of epic themes that I think Linda would embrace. She, was not afraid of sentiment, even though many of the works can be sort of distilled in their formal qualities. There's a real strong emotional sentiment in many of them. So this is the piece that one really exits Waking Dream. But as you exit Ruby City, or maybe the first piece you've seen when you come in is the Sylvie Fleury, which I think is our last image here. Be amazing. And Sylvie Fleury, of course, the Swiss artist, I think, plays with ideas of desire and consumerism, and oftentimes, they feel both that they could be a critique, but also a little bit celebratory, but always a critique. But here, this piece, Be Amazing, I think has a nice ambiguity, and we have it in the hallway, the sort of entry hallway of Ruby City. And I think that just sort of has me falling at the very flat at the end, but to say that I've taken us through. I think it's hard to do a walkthrough without actually walking, but I hope that this gave you a sense of really, as much anything, my thinking of the themes and associations of the works in Linda's collection, and how they can reflect her sensibility. But of course, what we see is that they reflect the world around us. They appeal to us, for the same reasons, maybe for the same reasons they appealed to Linda, but that they stand on their own. You don't need to know about Linda to understand these works. But how lucky for us that we did know Linda. So there you go. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kathryn. That was great. And I mean, this is, I guess, like I'm always trying to find the upside of COVID, and this is one of those things, because I don't know that we would have done this walkthrough in this way that would allow people from across the world to join in. So it's been great to have you here and doing this. I mean, of course, we would have done it in person, which would have been fun too. But it's nice that we can offer this to our audiences who are around the world. But
I'm happy to do it. Happy to do it.
And I guess I'm sort of wondering, I'm always curious about the logistics of these things, of putting shows together. And I guess I'm kind of curious about you're installing a show in a new space. I mean, you're also remote too. And so can you talk a little bit about that process, about how that actually, the installation came to be? Because like, I mean, I'm sure you knew, I mean, you lived with the floor plans of the building, and then but being in the space is always so different. And as a curator, you really get to know your space over time.
Yeah, usually, right?
Yeah.
No, I got two words, Kelly O'Connor. So, I mean, Kelly, who's worked for the foundation and worked for Linda before that, for years, was instrumental, in terms of likewise having an intimacy with the artworks, knowing the pieces, but was also on site. But I think, so we had models, we had maquettes. I'm super analog. I mean, I do everything with like Post-it notes and pencils. I don't sketch up anything, but we did in fact have a model and made small maquettes so we could see. Because one of the things with Ruby City is Linda's collection had been seen in her home, right? I mean, so we had installed works together at Elm Court at her house. And then when she moved to Camp Street, installing them there. And that was suddenly already a much larger space. The Camp Street loft had high ceilings, and distance different from her home. So I suppose there was a little kind of incremental, like, okay, I've seen this piece in many places, more contained and then larger. And then suddenly you get to like the glorious galleries that are David Adjaye's. And so I think we tried to, one thing I wanted to do was to play with scale, because part of Linda's interest in Ruby City was to have the collection become more institutionally scaled, as she wanted to be able, she showed that Leonardo drew in her home, but she wanted to be able to show to acquire and to exhibit other works of that scale. So knowing that, thought about anchoring each of the main galleries with something substantial, like, by size, so that's how Doho Sa, found its way into the East Gallery. Is that the East Gallery? And then the Cornelia Parker debuting in the West Gallery. So that those almost became their own kind of architecture within the space. And then also to think about the opportunities of the walls, like that beautiful soaring wall in the East Gallery. So to have the Abramovich chair, which when you saw it outside was great because it looked up, and it was like looking at a tree, a palm tree or something. But to be able to read it against the wall like a drawing, from coming up off the stairway was a great opportunity, right? So certain things I think logistically you could just know by scale, say, okay, that'll anchor it. And then it's like, well, so then where does Chuck go? Where does Rachel White-Reed go? Like that happened more, I think, in the space. And nothing easy about installing the Doho Sa or the Cornelia Parker, so like those are complicated just installations that Kelly oversaw.
That's great. And then if anybody has any questions, feel free to write in. But I think another thing I wonder, you've known the collection for a long time, so to speak, right? And I guess I'm wondering, in doing this show, was there something that struck you anew about working with it?
No, I think it was what I saw in it, and what I think is the benefit for the public are the associations between the works. Because for Linda to live with the collection, even in Camp Street, which was a larger loft, but generally you'd see things one piece at a time. You'd walk in the front door and there was a Larry Pittman, and then you'd go down the hallway and there was a Ann Chu, or however, like just one thing at a time. And I think, what I hope is more evident here is the associations between the objects. I want each object to have its like, power, and they are like, each one is exquisite, but you can find a thread through them. So I think for me, seeing just how many themes there were, like how consistent. I mean, I really do think that, the home, vulnerability, resilience, materiality, light, the micro, the macro, like those themes are, super consistent. So to me, that was exciting to see, where I think probably I'd thought about things more one at a time, piece by piece.
Well, Kathryn, this has been terrific.
Well, it's nice to revisit the works. Thank you for making it happen. I missed the space and seeing the things in person, but the photography reminds me how beautiful it is.
Yes, and we will hopefully be welcoming you back here very soon. And hopefully all of you out there watching this will be welcoming you too to come see this exhibition before it closes. Again, on July 24th, that's the last day. So make your way over. And Kathryn, I just, again, want to call out how grateful I am to you for taking the time to do this.
Welcome.
And we really appreciate the amazing exhibition that you've opened Ruby City with. It's been a delight to live with this. I mean, even when we've been closed, it's been kind of terrific for staff. All of us have wandered up from time to time on our own just to spend some time in the spaces and to see the work. So thank you for this great show and for this program tonight. And thanks as well to Barbara and Randy for organizing everything.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elise.
Yeah. So have a great evening, everyone. And thank you for tuning in.